Every collector's path is different. Some of us hunt for the pristine, while others find beauty in the well-loved corners of a century-old card. Some of us collect what we know. Others dig deep into the research and the great hobby mysteries. But no matter the path, every journey starts in the same place, a love of the game. Welcome to the Love of the Game Auctions podcast. I'm your host, Crisafulli. On this show, we're going beyond the auction block to talk about the legends, the rarities, and the long-forgotten stories that make this hobby great. I'll be joined by guests who live and breathe sports, experts who help us see the hobby through a different lens. So if you value the lore as much as the score, you're in the right place. Let's go. Thanks for being here. I'm Crisafulli of Love of the Game Auctions, and today's episode starts with a bat that once sat in the hands of Yankees great Lou Gehrig. Later in the show, we'll be joined by an artist who has spent his life bringing baseball's past back into living color. But first, I want to tell you the story of an unexpected and incredibly significant discovery. It's a great story, and when we started to talk about telling stories, this was the obvious one to kick off this podcast with. It's probably the item that put Love of the Game on the map. Late in 2014, I got an email from a woman who had a game-used Lou Gehrig bat that she wanted to sell. She had the bat authenticated, but wanted to know, how do auctions work? How does this whole process work? So I responded with a big, lengthy diatribe about the auction business and how everything works, and then I waited. A couple of weeks went by, and I didn't hear anything, and I assumed that she had chosen to go in a different direction. But one day, I got a very competitive consignment, and I was really happy and feeling pretty confident. So I decided to reach out to this lady again, and so I sent her an email and got some more information from her. This time she responded, and she said yes, she had been overwhelmed by responses to her email about what do I do with the Gehrig bat, and lots of auction houses offered her money and offered her premium catalog positions. But we actually answered her questions, which was, how do auctions work and how does the business work? So she opened up a little bit and told me some more information about the bat. It was a Hanna Batright bat that was obtained in the 1940s by her mother, who had a friend who was whose father was a member of the Yankee Stadium ground crew. For years, this weapon sat behind the front door of their house. It was the weapon. It was if somebody breaks into the house, you hit them with this bat. I have one of those, but it's not Lou Gehrig's bat. It's a Walmart special, right? But theirs was Lou Gehrig's bat. For years, on all of these different occasions, they almost gave the bat away. There were all different stories where there was a young child who was playing baseball out in the street, and the mother said, maybe that person would like this bat. Or Derek Jeter broke the record for the most hits by a Yankee, and they thought, well, maybe we'll send this to Derek Jeter and he'll send us some tickets. But the daughter, whose name was Nancy, kept saying, Ma, just hold off. This bat might be worth something. So finally, after years, the mother said, tell you what, Nancy, if you can get some money for the bat, I'll split it with you. So Nancy set about trying to figure out, how do I do this? How do I sell this bat? So she reached out to the Baseball Hall of Fame, who explained the process of authenticating bats and how all of that worked. And she went to PSA DNA and got the bat authenticated. It had a grade of GU8, which is a pretty great grade. So after all of this back and forth, this is how I find myself in the Chester Diner in Chester, New Jersey, talking to Nancy and her cousin about this bat on a Saturday morning during the breakfast rush. What I didn't know, and I found out later, was Nancy's brother was also in the diner, a few tables behind us, sitting by the door in case I decided to steal the bat and run out the door. He could tackle me before I got to the parking lot. But we hit it off really well, and I didn't try and steal the bat. So I sat there and explained what Love of the Game was and why I thought we were the right choice for her to consign the bat. And then I asked if I could see it. So they pulled it out of the bat tube and they handed it to me across the table, and it was beautiful. It was just a great shade of amber. It had tape on the handle, but the wood itself was in outstanding condition. And once I got the realization of what I was holding, It wasn't about how much is this thing worth. What was blowing my mind was that I was holding Lou Gehrig's bat. And so I did what any red-blooded American male would do. I got up in the middle of the diner, in the middle of the breakfast crowd, and I got into my batting stance, and I took a couple of practice cuts with Lou Gehrig's bat in the middle of the diner. I found out later that that was the thing that got us the consignment, is that Nancy could see that it wasn't just stuff. It was something that I was passionate about. So we got the consignment and I was thrilled. And then we set about how to present this bat to the hobby. At the time, Lou Gehrig bats were very rare. There were fewer than 20 known, and most of those were Louisville Slugger bats, which are undoubtedly more popular. They're much easier to authenticate than Hannah Batright bats, and so they sold for more. A Lou Gehrig Batright bat was maybe a $30,000 bat. A Louisville Slugger was maybe $100,000 at the time. So the thing that we knew about Hannah Batright and Gehrig was that he used them. We knew that because in 1933, Hillerick and Bradsby sued Hannah Manufacturing over trademark infringement. They were putting players' names on the bats that were under contract to Hillerick and Bradsby, selling them in retail stores. So Lou Gehrig had to testify, and he testified that he used Hannah Batright bats from 1929 to 1931. So we know that he used the bats from that court testimony. We also know that Gehrig insisted on having the weight of the bat stamped into the knob, and that was unusual for Hannah Manufacturing, who usually put the length of the bat on the knob, but Gehrig insisted on the weight, and this bat had the weight stamped into the knob. So that's how it got authenticated, and we wrote the description accordingly. But what kept bugging me was that I wanted to find a photo of Lou Gehrig holding a Batright bat. There's lots of photos of Gehrig holding bats, but they're all Louisville Sluggers. And I thought it would be easy to find a photo of Gehrig holding a Batright bat. It took months and I found nothing. And I finally decided, okay, I give up. So we went ahead and we produced the catalog. And then one day when I had a little bit of downtime, I have no idea what combination of words that I searched. I have no idea how I searched, but all of a sudden on my screen, there was a little thumbnail image of Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, and Bob Shockey. And between Gehrig's knees is a bat that was clearly a Hannah Batright bat. I found out who owned the rights to that bat, or the photo, sorry. And I reached out to them. I bought the rights to use the photo. And then we set about trying to figure out what's the biggest scan that you can send me. They sent me a 300 dots per inch, then a 600 dots per inch. And eventually they sent me a full 2400 dot per inch scan of this photo. And I blew it up as big as I could on the 27-inch iMac that I work on. So I've got the bat, the photo of the bat on the screen in front of me, and I have the bat itself in my lap. And I'm looking up and I'm looking down, and it becomes pretty clear it's the same bat. So I reach out to John Taubé at PSA DNA and I send him the photo. He takes a look and he says, you need to come down here. So I bring the photo, the bat down, and John photo matched the bat right there. And then it became the only known photo match Lou Gehrig bat. It's a big deal. It was a bat that was owned by a woman that was the weapon in the house. She had it there. She almost gave it away so many different times, and she kept it. And it turns out that I've got a picture of Lou Gehrig in Comiskey Park in 1930 holding this bat in his hands. This thing took off. It went viral. It was everywhere. I was on TMZ. I was on, there was a reality television show that was made about this bat. Believe it or not, I believed that I was the first auction house owner to be on a reality television show. And I can tell you this, there's nothing real about reality television. That's a whole conversation for another day, but it was fun to do, but it was not reality at all. So now we come to the auction. The family had been offered $30,000 for the bat. So they told me as long as they got $32,000, they would feel comfortable that they made the right decision to go with Love of the Game. when the auction opened, we were at the National in Chicago, and bidding shot right up to 70,000. So I felt really confident and really happy that that we were going to be giving this family back double what they were expecting or what they were hoping for. So that was pretty cool. As we got closer to auction day, you start paying attention to the other lots when you're an auction owner. You want to see how the auction is going. You're looking at the auction holistically. It's hard, especially on closing day, to pay any attention to one particular item, right? The auction is running. Bids are coming in every second. Multiple bids every second. It's hard to keep your eye on one thing. Instead, I like to look at the things that I think are a little slow, and I use that as a gauge, and I reach out to customers that I think might be interested in those items. I'll pick up the phone and I'll call somebody and say, hey, did you see this? Or I'll send an email, hey, check this lot out, and that sort of thing. That's sort of what I'm doing on auction night. In addition to answering a lot of customer questions when they call up and they want to know, hey, is that a crease or is that in the holder? That kind of question. Those are coming in as consigners or as customers are deciding whether to place another bid on a thing. So I wasn't really paying that close attention to the Gehrig bat. And my wife, of course, said, oh my God, look. And I looked at the Gehrig bat, and the bidding was at $250,000, which was more than anything we had ever sold before. It was the biggest selling item in the short history of Love of the Game at that point. And that's when I started really paying attention to the bat and how it was doing. And the bids kept coming and they kept coming. And at the end of the night, the bat had closed at $437,000, which was a record price for a Gehrig bat. And it was also one of, at the time, the highest selling bats of any player. So I was really happy about that. The following morning, we actually got a phone call from a customer who offered straight up $500,000 and asked me to call the winning bidder and see if they would be interested in selling the bat for $500,000 plus our commission. And so I did. I called the winning bidder, and the winning bidder said, no way. That's the most famous bat in the hobby, and no price is going to pry it away from me. So that felt great. It's still one of the most famous bats in the hobby. It's easily worth $1 million today, and probably considerably more. And I'm proud to have been involved with the discovery of the bat, bringing it to the hobby, and certainly with photo matching. But the best part of it was at the end when we got paid, and I wrote the check out to the family who consigned the bat. And I called up Nancy and I said, listen, this is a really big check. I don't want to mail this to you. I want to give it to you. So we went to the Chester Diner one more time. And in the parking lot, I handed Nancy's mother a check for $400,000 and change. And the hug that I got from Nancy's mother, I'm still chasing that hug 10 years later. It was the best feeling that I've had since I started Love of the Game. And that is the story behind the sale. My guest today is somebody who doesn't just appreciate baseball history, he paints it back to life. For more than 20 years, Greg Kryler has been recreating the golden eras of the game in oil. The ballparks, the legends, the light, the texture, all in living color. He digs through news service photos, old newsreels, home movies, newspaper clippings, anything he can get his hands on to make sure that every detail is right. His work has been featured everywhere from the New York Times to Sports Illustrated to MLB Network. And if you're hoping to commission an original, you'll only have to join a wait list that's 11 years long. He's also a really good friend, which makes this a lot of fun. Greg, welcome.
Hello, Al. How are you?
I'm doing okay. How about you?
Good. I'm happy to see your face and also happy to hear about that Gehrig bat.
It's such a great story.
It's so great. It
was so much fun to go through all of that. There were so many ups and downs and things about the story that it's hard to condense into a little podcast story. I could sit and talk about it for hours and all the little twists and turns, but it was a lot of fun. How are you dealing with all the snow?
Well, not too bad. I mean, we we only got a little bit last night, but as
Right.
you know, a few days before we got about a foot and a half.
Oof.
So the kids had a snow day, which was nice for them. Uh,
Yeah. How's
Maybe
that for you?
less nice for me. I didn't really get anything done, but that's okay.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I
Um,
hear you.
but yeah, I mean, Brooklyn is still it's still running, and people are still shoveling and yelling at each other, and
City never
the
sleeps.
city never sleeps, man.
Yeah. So Greg, I thought about how are we going to do this interview, because you've been interviewed in so many different places, so many different ways, and a lot of it is the same sort of Greg Kryler origin story stuff, and I want to sort of avoid that and try and ask you questions that are a little less boring for you. So we all know about your art education and all of that, and obviously you've got a tremendous background, but I'm curious about what made you decide to do athletes as opposed to still lifes or landscapes or movie stars or something else. What drew you to sports?
That's a great question. It's hard to kind of pinpoint a specific moment, but I think going to the School of Visual Arts with like the intent of being like a book cover illustrator for science fiction and fantasy novels, I wasn't really thinking of anything other than that. I was thinking of just breaking into that industry, and baseball was very far from my mind. I mean, outside of keeping track of what the Yankees were doing at the time, because as you know, they had a pretty decent run in the late '90s. Uh,
Yeah, I heard that.
yeah, uh, but yeah, at some point during my time at the school, I kind of I I was floundering a bit because I didn't really feel like the science fiction fantasy stuff was where my heart was at.
Okay.
I'm not sure why, because I'd kind of always been into the imagery associated with that genre, and I just, for whatever reason, it just like didn't tug on the heartstrings that I thought it was kind of supposed to. Uh,
Okay.
as someone who's going to pursue a career, it's kind of like you want to really feel confident about where you're dipping your toes into. But
Sure.
yeah, it didn't feel right. And I floundered for a bit, and I tried a lot of different things. I kind of changed up my, I guess, my style a little bit with how I kind of, painted and how I made marks.
Right.
Tried different, subject matter, and something happened. I think, when I was in my senior year, and I'm in my portfolio class. For anyone who doesn't know, this is for an illustrator. Your portfolio class is kind of your main thing, where you're working on stuff that you're going to eventually submit to editors and art directors and whatnot when you graduate.
Sure.
So yeah, this is something that you want to take pretty seriously. Um, and what happened was the teacher would kind of give us an assignment, a very general assignment, so everyone could kind of go off in their own direction. And one particular week, he gave us the assignment of illustrating a relationship. And
Okay.
for whatever reason, one of the first things that came to mind was the relationship between a pitcher and a batter. And
Okay.
I did this painting that kind of harkened back to when I was younger, like uh, drawing Mickey Mantle off of like my dad's, 51 crumpled 51 Bowman rookie,
Right.
trying to get the pat on the head. Uh, and yeah, I just something really clicked with that. I really enjoyed doing the painting. I really enjoyed doing the research. Uh, I knew how anal baseball fans are, uh,
Sure.
and I'm one of them, so I'm anal too. So I kind of knew
Right.
that everything had to look the way it was supposed to look.
Right.
So researching that, like trying to make sure that Mickey Mantle looked like Mickey Mantle, that in this particular case Ebbets Field looked like Ebbets Field, and all of the color information inside, like the color of the advertisements and the color of the grass and the sky and all that, that had to be right.
Right.
And like every part of it, like every single part of the process, the research, the painting, the struggling. I mean, there was struggling. It
Sure.
all felt great. So,
Huh.
um,
Wow.
yeah, it kind of,
So so do you go from there to deciding that's what I want to do? This is the person I want to be. I want to be a sports artist.
well,
Is it like an instant thing or is it a slow evolution?
it was a slow evolution
Yeah.
because I did that painting and it was great, or it felt great and it was received pretty well. Uh, but I wasn't like, okay, this is it for me. I was still kind of feeling things out a bit, and even by the time I graduated and moved back in with my parents, God bless them, uh, I was still kind of figuring out what I wanted to do with myself.
Sure.
But I was also doing these baseball paintings. I was thinking, okay, well, this image of Jimmy Fox that I saw is really cool. Let's see if I can make a painting of it. And
Huh.
I always loved Carl Hubble, so let me do a painting of him and all this stuff. Uh, so I'm like doing that in my spare time without really, the pressure of having to pay serious bills yet. Uh,
Right.
Living, with mom and dad. Um, so I don't know. I did more of those, and the more I did them, the more I was thinking, maybe can I do something with this? Can
What was the first painting you sold?
the first painting I sold? Um, oh, look at that handsome man. Uh, no, you mean the first painting in general, or the first baseball painting?
First baseball painting.
Okay, the first baseball painting I sold, I think it was a it was a small, it was like 18 by 24 painting of Joe DiMaggio getting a hit in the in his 44th consecutive game in
Okay.
1991. And it was a
Huh.
shot that is from kind of behind, home plate, kind of on the third base side. You see
Right.
Yankee Stadium in the distance, and uh, I don't remember the exact details of who was pitching or whatever,
Sure. Right.
but it was against the Red Sox, and I remember doing all this research on this particular day, and there were so many interesting things that I knew were going to kind of make their way into the painting. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't know how to do it. So, like, uh, as an example, it was an overcast day on this particular afternoon, and it was a double header if I remember, and I think the second game was, yeah, that's right, it was a double header.
Okay.
Second game was called because of rain.
This is the mind of a guy who is buried in details. This is how long ago was this painting?
No, well, it gets
And you
worse.
still remember it was a second game in the third inning.
There's a reason. I'll tell you the reason that I remember that. So it's the second game of the doubleheader, and the game ends, I think, after the fifth inning or whatever.
Okay.
So they're talking a little about the weather and saying how like there was a blue haze on the field. They meaning the newspaper writers
Sure. Okay.
saying a blue haze on the field, and all of the photography that I had seen from that day, it was all kind of overcast.
Right.
So I'm trying to figure out in my 26-year-old mind, how do I paint an overcast day that is also very hazy?
Okay.
And I worked really hard at it, and I didn't do a great job. I mean, I would do it a lot
Yes, you
differently now.
did.
No, well, but but the reason I remembered it was a doubleheader was because DiMaggio's bat, the one that he had been using during the streak, was stolen in between the two games.
Oh,
So I had to figure out, okay, he's using a bat. What bat is he using? Apparently, he was using one of Tommy Henrich's bat. So I'm thinking, okay, Tommy Henrich is still alive. Can I write him and ask him if he remembers anything about this game or this bat or whatever? And I got his address and I wrote him, this long diatribe of a message.
whoa.
And I sent him like an image of like the photographs I was using and the painting like in progress or whatever. And he wrote back. He wrote back after a week or so, and
No
I think it
kidding.
was just like one line. It was like, "I'm sorry, I don't remember anything about this game."
That's
I was
great.
like, "All right, great." So
So this brings up a whole nother thing because I'm fascinated by your attention to detail, and a lot of your fans are too. Um, you're staring at a black and white photo from 1909. How do you even begin to figure out what color is everything, and how much do you go into in terms of researching all of that, and how do you do it? It's take us through that a little bit.
I mean, it's a maddening process, but still fun. Um, the thing is, what I like to think of when I'm looking at a black and white photograph, I'm reminding myself that even if this is something that took place 60 years ago or whatever, I might know, what year it is, I might know what month it is, I might know what day it is. I know that, I know what a sky and what things might look like in that particular light.
Right.
Now I can go out and see that, and it's going to be, for the most part, the same as what it would have looked like back then, barring a
Sure.
few minor details. Uh, so, in a way, it's important for me to kind of to be true to what I see in the photograph in terms of the value scale that's in the photograph and the contrast between those values. Uh, because let's say there's heavy contrast between the values, in most situations, it's going to be kind of like a really bright day, with really dark shadows, and I'll think, okay, what would constitute a bright day, with shadows? What does that look like compared to, say, an overcast day, with a cool silver sky or whatever?
Right.
And a lot of that comes from working from life, working from models, doing plein air painting, which I used to do when I was in school and like just out of school, uh, and just kind of observing, just kind of there were times when I'd go to a game, I'd go to Yankee Stadium, and I would just sit and watch the game, but not really pay attention to the game. Just kind of watch the stadium, watch how the shadows kind of would creep across the diamond or
Sure.
whatever. And this is stuff that I'd write down or kind of take internally. And there'd be different ways to kind of, I guess, arrange it in my head. But when I got down to actually painting, I knew kind of what I had to do, just in terms of you know taking a black and white photograph and turning it into something that was color. Um,
So in researching all of these details, what's the coolest detail that you uncovered that people might not know?
the coolest detail. Okay, it's a very good question. Um, I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can tell you the coolest detail, but I can tell you a detail that I discovered very recently, like a couple of months ago, that like drives me bonkers that it existed. So I'm just doing kind of random newspaper research on ballparks. Uh,
Okay.
and typically what I would do is, if there's a particular year in which a ballpark was getting renovated or in between seasons or whatever, I would know that, the newspaper men in the next day or in the first day of the paper, or maybe even before, or sorry, first game of the year, or maybe even before that, they might be at the stadium and they might be commenting saying, "Oh, well, the new grandstand was painted red or green or whatever, and the
Right.
Lifebuoy sign is huge now or whatever." Uh, so I was randomly looking at Ebbets Field in, was it 30? It was 38. Yeah, I was looking at Ebbets Field, and I think it was 38 or 37, but definitely,
Okay.
yeah, 38. And that particular year, sorry,
It's June. It was June of 38.
it was it was April of 14. It
Uh-huh.
was 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Um, it was it's definitely 1938. And
Okay.
the newspaper man is in Ebbets Field, and they're describing the color of the grandstands, or just the stands in general. And you've seen photographs of Ebbets Field. You can kind of imagine what Ebbets Field looks like.
Sure.
Maybe even in color. Maybe you've seen some color photographs of it. Apparently, that year, for whatever reason, the seats were painted turquoise, like a bright turquoise. And
Wow.
yeah, and some of the some of like the steel girders, the architecture, uh, maybe even the rails or whatever were painted orange. And I was like, this is so bizarre. This can't be true. But
Wow.
I looked at a few other papers and it was true. And it's like it was such an eye opener for me because when I first started out doing this stuff, I just kind of figured, okay, well, if it's a scene from 1910 or whatever, the ballpark will just be like your standard, green color, your ballpark green. But
Right.
I had learned that
Turquoise
that's
and
not the
orange.
case. Yeah,
Okay.
turquoise and
Okay.
orange, and even in back in those days, uh, those ballparks or the people who tended the ballparks or whatever were all about saving money, and the
Right.
cheapest paint that they were finding was probably red or some earth color base. So it
Yeah.
makes sense why that happened. But
Sure.
turquoise and orange, no idea.
Never would have thought.
Never would have thought. It was just
So
yeah.
so I can still remember the first time, when we met probably, gosh, probably 20 years ago now.
Oh
And
my
but
god.
I know you're old. I I
Really?
had
Was I married when we
no,
met? Oh,
no.
oh my god.
So when we met, I had never actually seen one of your paintings in real life. I had seen photos of them, and lots of photos of them, and we'd had conversations and exchanged emails and done all kinds of things. But it wasn't until the national, maybe 2007, that I actually saw one of your paintings in real life. I was there when one of what do you call them, commissions?
Uh,
Is it
I say clients.
clients? One of your clients, who happened to be a close friend of mine, opened up a portrait that you painted based on the Carl Horner photo of Smokey Joe Wood,
Oh,
and
yeah.
and it I was shocked at my own reaction to it. It brought tears to my eyes, and
Because it was so
I,
bad.
yeah, it was hideous. But no, I wasn't expecting to have that kind of an emotional reaction to a painting of a player that was based on a photo I had seen 100 times, right? And so it got me thinking a little bit. When you see somebody who stands in front of one of your paintings for the first time
Right.
and gets emotional for whatever reason, is it brings it back to their childhood, or whatever. What's that like to you, to experience someone else experiencing your work in front of you?
That's a very good question. Um, it's a spectrum of feelings.
Okay.
There's always imposter syndrome.
Sure.
No matter how much
Right.
success I might have at any given point, I'm thinking, this painting sucks, and why is this person even
Right.
talking to me? Uh, but there, if I'm able to kind of see somebody looking at the work and responding to it, um, emotionally in some
Yeah.
way, then I kind of feel like at that point, like I've done it,
Yeah.
like done what I was supposed to do. It goes beyond doing a painting of Mickey Mantle that looks like Mickey Mantle. Um, in
Yeah.
that particular case with that Smokey Joe, uh, it's kind of like, yes, it looks like Smokey Joe. I want the person who looks at it, I want them to feel like they're in the room with Smokey Joe. Like they're in Carl's
Yeah.
studio watching that photograph being taken. And when
So you're doing more than just trying to paint something that looks like the player. You're trying to paint the feeling. You're trying to, yeah, I
yeah,
like it.
yeah, it's weird because it's kind of intangible stuff.
Sure.
I think, but yeah, it goes beyond looking like the player or looking like the photograph or whatever.
Right.
There's something more that I really hope kind of gets brought to each painting. Uh,
Yeah.
but I mean, sometimes, or even a lot of times, when I think I'm not necessarily like super successful at it, the client will have a great reaction, and they'll be like, "Oh, that's awesome." But still, part of me is like, "What is wrong with you?"
Sure. Sure.
But yeah, there's like so. I did I did this project with a collector out in Seattle a couple of years back, and it was this big project in scope where I had to paint. It was like 240 small color studies of various Negro leaguers and Latin American
Sure.
leaguers, and the culmination of this was that the show was going to hang at the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum in Kansas City.
Mm-hmm. I remember this.
Yeah, and specifically on February 13th, 2020, which sure is right before the pandemic, but more importantly, it was the centennial of the formation of the Negro National League.
Uh-huh.
So it was, it was kind of like a big to do, like the opening or whatever. And I went. It was an amazing experience, but like one part of it really sticks out to me where I saw an older gentleman looking at this painting I did of Bullet Rogan, and he's kind of looking at it for like a couple minutes. He's taking it in, and later in the evening, he comes up to me and he was complimenting me on it, and he introduced himself as Bullet Rogan's grandson,
Oh, wow.
and I'm like, what? And I shook his hand, and he was like super sweet and super excited to meet me for some reason, and was really complimentary about the painting.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm shaking the hand of Bullet Rogan's,
Yeah.
grandson. This is incredible. So it kind of worked, in both ways, like for him and for me, because I got to
Sure.
kind of like hang out with, in my head, like a living legend or something like that,
Right.
which goes to show you that I have serious issues. But
No, I mean, that's good stuff. You know, I still remember the two parties removed excitement that I got when I saw Chuck D retweeting you. Like, so I kind of get it. It's like a whole different level of appreciation when you're that close to either a relative of a player, or somebody who is legendary and partially legendary for their appreciation of sports or
right.
whatever, and they take in your work and they see it and they comment on it. It's amazing. Like, I'm like, oh, that's my buddy. So I think that's pretty cool.
I I mean, still to this day, that is insane. If you had
Yeah.
told, 13-year-old Greg that Chuck D
Yes.
of Public Enemy would be into what I do,
Yeah.
I would not be able to handle that. That's insane.
That's pretty cool.
That's insane.
So can we dip into technique a little bit, because I have you here and I've always wondered this.
How dare you?
I'm sorry, but we, a lot of times you post your work in progress when
Mhm.
right from when you start, when the canvas is prepped and you haven't done anything to it, to when it's finished. And I notice that you do this thing. There's all these like swirly lines, and what am I looking at when I'm seeing that?
I don't know. What are you looking at?
Is it just in my head? Are they floaters, or is that real?
Listen, as you know, I am a deadhead, so I do try to lace my
I see.
photography with LSD whenever I can. So what you're looking at with those drawings, they're basically, those are done for the most part. The majority of my paintings, especially the larger ones, are done from a projector.
Okay.
And what I'm tracing, usually in addition to contour lines, are delineations in value,
Okay.
mostly because I'm trying to kind of treat the painting as sculpture, and so
Okay.
values are kind of maybe the most important part to me. So, like, you can see it here, like on this screen, where I have this dark shape here,
Uh-huh.
and then like this light shape here. Like that
Right.
I would kind of mark that off as two shapes,
Sure.
on the canvas. And it just so happens that, there are some areas that just have a lot of different values in them. So, like the squiggly lines, they end up looking almost like a contour map. Uh,
Okay.
and in a way, it is. It's
Yeah.
actually like sometimes people joke or even accuse me of doing, like paint by numbers, and
Right, right.
not that much different. I mean, it's the same kind of idea. I mean, sure, I have to, mix the colors and manipulate edges and all
Sure.
these things. But having
I
that drawing there like that, having, a skeleton, a roadmap to follow is something that I really like having.
Yeah. Well, I think you're selling yourself short a little bit about the technique and being paint by numbers, but I think there's way more skill involved there than that. And one of the questions I was going to ask you, you just answered about just the simple process of color, and how you're not just taking paint out of a tube. You're actually mixing colors to achieve a certain shade, a certain level of shadow, and different values of the colors. Like you said, if you look at anything on your screen right now, nothing is solid green or solid blue. There's all different variations based on how the light is hitting it, and based on a million other things that I can't possibly know because I have no art education whatsoever. But I think it's kind of cool to think of how much artistry just goes into the color.
Yeah, I mean, well, thank you, but also
I didn't mean to compliment you. It was an accident.
well, I was just trying to take what I can. Um, it's yeah, it's I mean, color is a lot of fun,
Yeah,
um, you know, to say the least. But
sure.
it's trying to say this without sounding like an idiot, but it's kind of hard. It's hard to kind of extrapolate what you see, around you in the world around you with your own eyes, in three dimensions, and trying to take
Yeah,
that and putting it on a two-dimensional surface to make it look three-dimensional.
yeah,
And the things that you kind of have to know about color, light, edges, any
sure.
number of things. It's like it's a symphony. I mean, it's kind of, you're a music guy. You know how much goes into, mixing a record, and
Sure.
it's the same kind of thing.
I remember watching as you were posting progress on a painting you were making of Dick Allen, and he was wearing a batting helmet on a sunny day,
Right.
and you had posted it and said something like almost done. I just got to work on the light on his helmet. And I remember looking at the photo and thinking, what do you mean, almost? It's done. It looks great. And then you posted a couple of days later another, okay, it's done. And it was like a world of difference just in the way the light was reflecting off the top of his helmet,
Right.
and how that worked with the rest of the color in the photo. And I remember looking at that and saying, I have so much to understand about just that, and how cool that is, and how to capture that. So it's really amazing to see, and I'm glad that you post those progress photos as you're working on something, because it's a lot of fun to watch it take shape and come together.
Well,
Um,
thank you. But you know what? I enjoy just doing it, not only because it's kind of an easy and natural way to kind of promote your work.
yeah,
That doesn't sound too much like a car salesman. You're not like, hey, look at me and my work. You say, oh,
right,
well, this person has, the anniversary of their death or birth or when they did
sure.
something. So here's a painting I'm working on, whatever.
So, I know, one last question that I wanted to touch on a little bit was the weight, and what it takes to do a commission with you.
Oh, no.
Um, well, I'm kind of curious about your process, in that, I think that consumers in general approach things like, I go to the store, I wait online, I get to the front of the line, it's my turn to order. I order a cheeseburger, I get a cheeseburger, I pay for it, and I leave. And that's how every transaction works. And I get the feeling that when you're commissioning art, it's not that simple, because there's inspiration that needs to be in there. You're not a short order cook, right? So how does this work? Are you painting what's next in line, or do you have any number of different pieces that are going on at any given time that you go to as inspiration hits?
It's both, and then other stuff too.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I'm very blessed and thankful to have a pretty, long backlog of stuff that I still need to get to.
yeah,
And I do try to follow that in order. Uh, Sometimes it's hard, because
sure,
sometimes something will come in that I just get really excited about, or, a customer might come and they might pay a premium to have a rush
yeah,
job done.
sure,
Uh, and I try to kind of make everybody happy with that stuff, or try to keep them,
yeah,
sane, because artists can be flaky, and I can be flaky too sometimes. But
yeah,
yeah, I also find that I have to jump around a lot, because
sure,
if I'm working on, like a large panoramic piece that's like 4 feet by, you know 8 feet or something,
uh-huh,
maybe I'm standing in front of the canvas and I'm painting these tiny, tiny little heads and tiny little bodies and tiny little details.
right,
And I'll do that for a couple of days, and then I'll say, oh, I need to do something else. I need a break. So, maybe I'll take that painting and put it aside and
work
start
on something else.
something, a 9 by 12 that I'm just kind of blocking in the beginning, so I can, be
Gotcha.
more loose and broad or whatever. Uh, but, what happens if I randomly find a photograph for something that is really inspiring,
That you just
and that
have
I
to
and I
do,
have to do
right?
it.
Yeah, and you're
And
an
so
artist, and that's the way it works. And
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, and
I
I'll
get it.
I'll jump on it, and maybe I'll just get a little work into it, and I'll kind of put it aside and then go back to the other thing.
Right.
Um, but then there are also the clients who
Yeah.
uh, who sometimes regret buying a piece from me, because
It takes
because
forever. Yeah, I get it.
in that research, I might discover that, oh, this thing that I painted this color in your painting should not be this color. It should be
I
that
have
color.
it. I have experienced that with you, where
Yeah.
we got a consignment that you found out about, and you actually asked me to send it back to you. You had painted it 10 years prior,
Yeah.
and you needed to adjust the color of the piping of his jersey. So once you found that I had it, you made a change to it. All right, two more real quick ones. Um,
They have to be
if
quick.
people if people they do, we're short on time,
Oh, I'm
unfortunately. I
sorry.
could sit here and BS with you all day and love it, um but if people want to look at your work or hire you for a commission, how can they find you online?
Well, as long as you can spell my name, even somewhat correctly, you'll be able to find me. I have a website that is updated frequently. Just go to gregkreindler.com, Graig, like Greg Nettles, and Kreindler, Kreindler. And I'm pretty much on most social media platforms. The only one I don't really mess with too much is TikTok,
Uh-huh.
because I'm an elder, and I don't understand it like the kids do. No, I
Right.
understand it. I just don't think it's the right platform for me. But I'm on
Gotcha.
Facebook, I'm on Instagram, Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, Threads.
Cool.
Uh, but
And
yeah, you
if
can.
you don't follow Greg, I highly recommend it. It is a daily dose of art and beauty that comes into your life. A little bit of sarcasm and snarkiness too,
Mileage may vary.
which is right, which is pretty cool. Okay, Greg, the thing I want to do with this podcast is close every episode with the same question.
Okay.
Okay, and not a lot of thought. I just want what pops into your head. What is the thing that happened? What is the event that happened that caused you to fall in love with the game?
Oh man. You know what? Okay, I know what that is.
Okay.
Grew up with baseball, played it not well, had catches with my brother and my dad, enjoyed it. The first time that I saw When It Was a Game on HBO,
Oh,
which
yeah.
came out in the early 90s, that was when I got the flutters.
Yeah.
That was it,
Yeah.
because all of these players that, my dad had been telling me about my whole life, I actually got to see them, in color from these color home movie clips.
Yeah.
Anyone who doesn't know about that should absolutely track down the series, whether it's on Amazon or DVD or Blu-ray or even VHS. It's it's art, and
Yeah.
seeing those people in color made me realize these people actually, existed. Like, they
Yeah.
breathe the same air as me. You know, my dad, when he was a kid, the world wasn't in black and white. This is
Right.
proof.
Yes.
So
That's
yeah,
awesome.
that
That's awesome.
that's the moment, I think.
Very cool. Well, Greg, thanks so much for being with us. Again, I urge anybody who's got internet access to dig up Greg's Instagram or his Facebook and just follow it. It's a lot of fun. It's always good to see you, man. Thanks
Same
for
here.
joining us and being the guest on our first podcast.